Sarah Martinez clocked in at 0600 hours every morning at Fort Henderson's shooting range, carrying her thermos of coffee and wearing the same faded uniform that marked her as just another support staff member. The other soldiers barely noticed her as she unlocked the range office, checked the safety equipment, and prepared for another day of what everyone assumed was mundane paperwork and flag waving. At 28, Sarah had been working as a range safety officer for 3 years. Most people saw her small frame and quiet demeanor and figured she was just another civilian contractor, filling a desk job. The soldiers would joke among themselves about the little lady, who made sure they wore their ear protection and followed the basic safety protocols. They had no idea that behind her wire-rimmed glasses and reserved smile lived someone with an extraordinary gift. Sarah had grown up in rural Montana, where her grandfather taught her to hunt elk and deer in the vast wilderness surrounding their family ranch. By age 12, she could hit a tin can at 300 yards with her grandfather's old hunting rifle. By 16, she was outshotting grown men at local competitions. But when her grandfather passed away and the family lost the ranch, Sarah found herself alone in the world with nothing but her remarkable shooting ability and a fierce determination to serve her country. The military seemed like the perfect place for someone with her skills. But when Sarah enlisted, she discovered that being a woman in combat roles was still complicated, despite policy changes. Instead of infantry or special operations, she was assigned to range safety, a job that kept her close to weapons and marksmanship, but far from any real action or recognition. Every morning, she would watch soldiers practice their shooting, offering gentle corrections when they struggled with their stance or breathing technique. Most ignored her suggestions, assuming a range safety clerk couldn't possibly know more than they did about marksmanship. The few who listened were amazed at how quickly their accuracy improved. But they attributed it to lucky advice rather than genuine expertise. Sarah never complained or pushed back against the assumptions people made about her. She simply did her job with quiet competence, documenting training sessions, maintaining equipment, and ensuring everyone followed safety protocols. But during her lunch breaks and after hours when the range was empty and quiet, Sarah would sign out practice ammunition and work on her own shooting skills. She had converted an unused storage room in the range office into a small living space, claiming she needed to stay close to the facility for security reasons. The truth was, Sarah lived and breathed marksmanship. Her walls were covered with ballistics charts, weather data, and detailed notes about wind patterns and bullet trajectories. She studied advanced sniper techniques through online courses and military manuals, constantly pushing herself to improve. The other range safety officers thought she was just enthusiastic about her job, perhaps a bit too enthusiastic. They had no idea that Sarah was systematically teaching herself advanced sniper techniques that most special operations soldiers never mastered. She practiced breathing control exercises for hours, learned to calculate complex mathematical adjustments for long-distance shots, and developed an almost supernatural ability to read environmental conditions. Her supervisor, Sergeant Williams, appreciated having such a reliable and knowledgeable employee, but even he underestimated Sarah's true capabilities. He saw her dedication as admirable, but figured she was just a committed support staff member who took pride in maintaining a safe training environment. The idea that his quiet range safety clerk might be one of the most naturally gifted marksmen on the entire base never crossed his mind. Sarah's routine continued unchanged for months. She arrived early, performed her duties with quiet efficiency, helped struggling soldiers when they would accept her assistance, and spent her free time honing skills that nobody knew she possessed. She was invisible in plain sight, overlooked by everyone around her because she didn't fit their expectations of what a real marksman should look like. The irony wasn't lost on her. Here she was, surrounded by soldiers training to be warriors, while possessing abilities that exceeded most of theirs by a significant margin. But Sarah understood that respect and recognition had to be earned in the military, and opportunities didn't always come when you expected them. She simply continued preparing herself for the moment when her true capabilities would finally be revealed. The morning that everything changed started like any other. Sarah was checking the target systems when she heard unusual commotion from the parking area. A convoy of black vehicles had arrived, and soldiers in different uniforms were unloading specialized equipment she didn't recognize. Through the office window, She watched as serious-looking men in tactical gear set up what appeared to be advanced surveillance equipment around the perimeter of the base. Sergeant Williams rushed into the office, his face pale and urgent. He explained that there had been a security breach during the night. Someone had infiltrated the base's weapons storage facility and stolen several high-powered rifles along with thousands of rounds of ammunition. Intelligence suggested the thieves were still somewhere in the surrounding hills, possibly planning an attack on the base or nearby civilian areas. The FBI and military police had established a perimeter, but the terrain around Fort Henderson was perfect sniper country. Rolling hills covered with dense forest and rocky outcroppings that provided countless hiding spots. Traditional search methods were proving ineffective, and thermal imaging was being blocked by the thick canopy of trees. The stolen weapons included precision rifles capable of accurate fire at distances exceeding 800 yards, making the situation extremely dangerous. Sarah listened to the emergency briefing with growing concern, not just for the safety of everyone on base, but because she knew this terrain better than anyone. During her off-duty hours, she had spent countless days hiking and hunting in those very hills, learning every ridge, valley, and potential shooting position. She knew where someone with military training and high-powered rifles would likely set up to cause maximum damage. As the day progressed, the tension on base increased dramatically. All non-essential personnel were confined to secure buildings, and the normal training schedule was completely suspended. Sarah found herself in the unusual position of having nothing to do except monitor radio communications and watch the search teams struggle with the challenging terrain. Around noon, she overheard a frustrated conversation between two special operations officers who had been brought in to assist with the search. They were discussing the impossibility of covering all potential shooting positions with their available manpower. One mentioned that they needed someone who really understood the local terrain and could think like a sniper to predict where the criminals might position themselves. Sarah's heart raced as she realized she might be the one person on base who could help, but she also knew that volunteering would mean revealing capabilities that she had kept hidden for years. She wrestled with the decision, knowing that speaking up could change everything about her quiet, anonymous life at the base. The breaking point came when reports started coming in about suspicious movement spotted near the base's elementary school, located just 2 miles from the main facility. The stolen weapons were powerful enough to reach the school from several concealed positions in the hills, and intelligence indicated the criminals might be planning to use civilian casualties to force some kind of negotiation or create a distraction for their escape. Sarah made her decision. She approached Sergeant Williams and quietly explained that she had extensive knowledge of the surrounding terrain from her hunting background and might be able to help identify likely sniper positions. Williams was skeptical at first, but the urgency of the situation convinced him to pass her suggestion up the chain of command. Within an hour, Sarah found herself in a briefing room with FBI agents, military police commanders, and special operations officers, all looking at her with barely concealed skepticism. A range safety clerk offering tactical advice seemed almost ridiculous to these experienced professionals, but they were desperate enough to listen to any potentially useful information. Sarah spread out topographical maps of the area and began marking locations with quiet confidence that surprised everyone in the room. She explained sight lines, wind patterns, escape routes, and defensive positions with a level of detail that demonstrated genuine expertise. Her analysis was so thorough and technically accurate that the skeptical expressions around the table gradually changed to surprised attention. Colonel Henderson, the base commander, had been quietly observing the briefing. As Sarah continued her terrain analysis, he found himself increasingly impressed by her knowledge and tactical thinking. This wasn't amateur enthusiasm. This was the kind of detailed understanding that came from serious study and practical experience. The moment that truly caught his attention came when Sarah pointed to a specific ridge, approximately 600 yards from the school, and explained why it offered the perfect combination of concealment, multiple escape routes, and clear shooting lanes. Her analysis included factors like morning sun position, prevailing wind direction, and even the timing of school activities that most professional snipers would consider in their planning. As the briefing concluded and search teams prepared to investigate Sarah's suggested locations, Colonel Henderson made a decision that would prove to be crucial. Instead of sending her back to her desk, He asked Sarah to remain available as a consultant, suggesting that her terrain knowledge might be needed again as the situation developed. The search teams returned with disturbing news. They had found evidence of recent human activity at 2 of the positions Sarah had identified, including fresh footprints and spent shell casings from practice shots. The criminals were definitely in the hills, and they were clearly preparing for something significant. More troubling still, thermal imaging had detected what appeared to be multiple heat signatures moving through the forest, suggesting there might be more than the 2 or 3 suspects originally believed to be involved. Sarah remained in the command center as the situation escalated throughout the afternoon. She watched the tactical displays and listened to radio communications, her mind constantly analyzing the information and comparing it to her knowledge of the terrain. Something about the suspects' movement patterns bothered her, but she couldn't quite identify what was wrong with the official assessment of the situation. Late in the afternoon, everything went wrong very quickly. A patrol unit investigating one of Sarah's suggested positions came under accurate rifle fire from an unexpected direction. 2 soldiers were wounded, and the patrol was pinned down behind inadequate cover while the sniper maintained his position somewhere in the dense forest above them. Radio communications filled with urgent requests for support and medical evacuation. The command center erupted into controlled chaos as officers tried to coordinate a response. The problem was that traditional counter-sniper tactics required knowing the shooter's exact position, and the forest canopy made visual identification nearly impossible. Helicopter support was grounded due to the threat of ground fire, and sending additional troops into the area would likely result in more casualties. Colonel Henderson studied the tactical map with growing frustration. His soldiers were trapped in a deadly situation, and every minute of delay increased the risk that the wounded men wouldn't receive the medical attention they desperately needed. The sniper had chosen his position brilliantly, with multiple escape routes and excellent concealment that made conventional assault tactics extremely dangerous. Sarah had been quietly studying the same map, and she finally understood what had been bothering her about the movement patterns they had observed. The suspects weren't just randomly hiding in the forest. They were systematically occupying positions that created overlapping fields of fire, essentially turning a large section of the hills into a deadly trap for anyone who tried to approach. She approached Colonel Henderson with her analysis, explaining that the criminals appeared to have divided themselves into 3 teams, each controlling key terrain features that dominated the approaches to their central position. This wasn't the work of desperate thieves. This was a coordinated military operation, planned by people with serious tactical training and knowledge of the local terrain. The colonel listened to Sarah's assessment with growing concern, recognizing that she was describing a situation far more complex and dangerous than anyone had realized. If she was correct, attempting to assault the sniper positions with conventional infantry tactics would result in significant casualties and might not even succeed in rescuing the trapped patrol. As they discussed potential solutions, a radio report came in that changed everything. The forward observer with the pinned patrol had managed to identify the approximate position of the sniper who was keeping them trapped. He was located on a rocky outcropping approximately 750 yards from the patrol's position, but the angle and distance made it impossible for any of the soldiers to return effective fire with their standard weapons. Sarah stared at the coordinates on the map, her mind automatically calculating angles, distances, and environmental factors. She knew that outcropping. She had climbed it several times during her hiking expeditions. More importantly, she knew there was a clear line of sight to that position from a ridge on the opposite side of the valley, a location she could reach without exposing herself to fire from the other suspected sniper positions. The words came out before she could stop them. "I can make that shot." The command center fell silent. Everyone turned to look at the quiet range safety clerk, who had just claimed she could eliminate a target at 750 yards, a distance that challenged even experienced military snipers. Colonel Henderson stared at Sarah for a long moment, trying to reconcile this confident assertion with everything he thought he knew about her background and capabilities. Sarah realized there was no backing down now. She explained that she had been studying advanced marksmanship for years and had extensive experience shooting at long distances. She knew the terrain, understood the environmental conditions, and believed she could reach a position that would allow her to engage the target without exposing herself or the rescue teams to additional risk. The colonel faced an impossible decision. His soldiers were trapped and wounded. Conventional tactics appeared inadequate for the situation, and his only alternative was to trust a range safety clerk who claimed capabilities that seemed almost impossible to believe. But something in Sarah's quiet confidence and demonstrated knowledge of the terrain made him consider an option that under normal circumstances would seem completely absurd. After a moment of intense consideration, Colonel Henderson made the decision that would define both his career and Sarah's future. He authorized her to attempt the shot, but only under strict conditions. She would be accompanied by a spotter from the Special Operations Team. She would use military equipment rather than her personal weapons, and if she couldn't demonstrate her claimed abilities immediately, the mission would be aborted in favor of conventional assault tactics. Sarah nodded her acceptance of the conditions, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and terror. She was about to get the opportunity she had been preparing for her entire life. But failure would mean not just personal disappointment. It could cost lives and end her military career permanently. Staff Sergeant Mike Rodriguez couldn't believe his orders. As one of the base's most experienced snipers, with combat deployments in Afghanistan and Iraq, he was being asked to serve as spotter for a range safety clerk who claimed she could make shots that challenged even elite military marksmen. Rodriguez had 15 years of experience and knew that precision shooting at 750 yards required not just exceptional skill, but years of specialized training and real-world experience under pressure. The equipment they selected was a military-grade sniper system that Rodriguez knew intimately, a rifle he had used successfully in combat situations where lives depended on his accuracy. As they prepared to move out, he watched Sarah inspect the weapon with movements that surprised him. She didn't handle it like an amateur enthusiast. Her grip, stance, and systematic check of the rifle's components showed familiarity with precision, weapons that went far beyond casual range shooting. The journey to Sarah's chosen shooting position required a careful approach through terrain that kept them concealed from the suspected enemy locations. Sarah led the way with confidence that impressed Rodriguez despite his skepticism. She moved through the forest like someone who had spent years learning to navigate silently through dense vegetation, avoiding areas where their movement might be detected, and choosing paths that provided maximum concealment. When they reached the ridge Sarah had identified, Rodriguez immediately understood why she had chosen this location. The position offered excellent concealment behind natural rock formations, a clear line of sight to the target area, and multiple escape routes if they came under fire. More importantly, the angle would allow them to engage the sniper without exposing the trapped patrol to crossfire from other enemy positions. Sarah set up the rifle with movements that were both efficient and precise. Rodriguez watched her adjust the scope, check wind conditions, and calculate range with procedures that matched his own training exactly. When she asked him to confirm the range to target, her estimate was within 5 yards of his laser rangefinder measurement, accuracy that spoke to genuine experience with long-distance shooting. The target area was exactly as described in the radio reports. Through their scopes, they could see the rocky outcropping where the enemy sniper had positioned himself, and the muzzle flashes that periodically appeared as he continued to harass the pinned patrol. The distance was challenging, complicated by crosswinds and the downward angle of the shot. But Sarah's analysis of the environmental factors impressed Rodriguez with its sophistication and accuracy. As Sarah prepared for the shot, Rodriguez found himself genuinely curious about her background. Her breathing control was textbook perfect, her position behind the rifle was stable and professional, and her approach to the shot sequence followed advanced techniques that most soldiers never learned. This wasn't lucky amateur skill. This was the product of serious study and extensive practice. The radio crackled with updates from the trapped patrol. One of the wounded soldiers was losing blood rapidly and needed immediate medical evacuation. The enemy sniper continued to fire whenever anyone tried to move, keeping the entire unit pinned down behind inadequate cover. Every minute of delay increased the risk that a wounded soldier would die before they could be reached by medical personnel. Sarah made minute adjustments to her scope and settled into her final shooting position. Rodriguez could see her heart rate slow as she entered the focused mental state that experienced snipers cultivated for precision shots. Her breathing became deep and regular, and her grip on the rifle relaxed into the natural hold that allowed maximum accuracy. Through his spotting scope, Rodriguez watched the target area and called out environmental conditions as they changed. The wind was gusty and variable, requiring constant recalculation of bullet trajectory. The distance meant that even small errors in estimation would result in a complete miss, and they would only get one opportunity before the enemy sniper realized his position had been compromised. Sarah's finger moved to the trigger with deliberate precision. Rodriguez could see her mental preparation, the same focused concentration he had learned to develop during his own sniper training. She was clearly waiting for the perfect moment when all the environmental factors aligned to give her the best possible chance of making the shot. The moment came when the wind died to almost nothing, and the target briefly exposed himself to fire at the trapped patrol. Sarah's breathing stopped at the natural pause between breaths. Her body became perfectly still, and Rodriguez watched her squeeze the trigger with the smooth, consistent pressure that separated successful snipers from everyone else. The rifle recoiled against Sarah's shoulder with the familiar thump of a precision shot. Through his spotting scope, Rodriguez tracked the bullet's flight across the valley, watching for the impact that would tell them whether Sarah's claimed abilities were real or just confident delusion. The bullet seemed to hang in the air forever as it covered the 750 yards to the target. The impact was exactly where Sarah had aimed. The enemy sniper's position suddenly went silent, and Rodriguez could see through his scope that the threat to the trapped patrol had been eliminated. Sarah had made a shot that many experienced military snipers would have found challenging, and she had done it under pressure with lives depending on her accuracy. Rodriguez stared at Sarah with new respect and complete bewilderment. In 15 years of military service, he had never seen a more textbook-perfect long-distance shot, especially from someone with no official sniper training or combat experience. As radio reports confirmed that the patrol was no longer under fire and medical evacuation was proceeding, he realized that everything he thought he knew about this quiet range safety clerk had been completely wrong. News of Sarah's successful shot spread through the base faster than official communications could contain it. Within hours, everyone at Fort Henderson knew that their quiet range safety clerk had eliminated an enemy sniper at 750 yards, saving the lives of a trapped patrol and demonstrating marksmanship skills that exceeded those of most trained military snipers. The story seemed almost impossible to believe, but the rescued soldiers and Rodriguez's detailed report left no room for doubt. Colonel Henderson called Sarah into his office the following morning, still struggling to understand how he had missed such extraordinary capabilities in one of his own personnel. Sarah sat across from his desk in her standard duty uniform, looking exactly like the unremarkable support staff member she had appeared to be for the past 3 years, except for the quiet confidence that had emerged during the crisis. The colonel's first questions focused on Sarah's background and training. How had she developed such advanced shooting skills without any official military instruction? Where had she learned the tactical analysis that had proven so accurate during the emergency? Sarah explained her grandfather's influence, her years of self-directed study, and the countless hours she had spent practicing. Techniques that she had learned from military manuals and online courses. What impressed Colonel Henderson most was Sarah's systematic approach to developing her abilities. She hadn't just been playing with guns as a hobby. She had been methodically studying advanced marksmanship, as if preparing for exactly the situation they had faced. Her storage room quarters contained detailed ballistics charts, weather data, and shooting logs that documented years of serious training and improvement. Rodriguez joined the meeting to provide his assessment of Sarah's performance during the mission. As an experienced sniper instructor, his evaluation carried significant weight, and his description of Sarah's capabilities left Colonel Henderson with no doubt that they had discovered someone with truly exceptional natural talent, combined with impressive dedication to developing those gifts. The conversation then turned to Sarah's future at Fort Henderson. Her current position as a range safety clerk was clearly inadequate for someone with her demonstrated abilities. But military bureaucracy didn't easily accommodate dramatic career changes for personnel who had been misclassified for years. Colonel Henderson explained that he wanted to find a way to properly utilize Sarah's talents, but it would require navigating complex regulations and convincing higher-level commanders who hadn't witnessed her capabilities firsthand. Sarah listened to the discussion with mixed feelings. Part of her was thrilled that her abilities were finally being recognized and that she might have opportunities to serve in roles that better matched her skills. But she also understood that her quiet, anonymous life at the base was ending, and change in the military could be unpredictable and sometimes unwelcome. Over the following weeks, as the investigation into the base infiltration continued, Sarah found herself called upon repeatedly for her terrain knowledge and tactical insights. The criminals who had stolen the weapons were part of a larger organization with sophisticated planning capabilities, and Sarah's understanding of local geography proved invaluable in predicting their likely movements and escape routes. Each consultation reinforced Colonel Henderson's conviction that Sarah represented a valuable resource that had been completely underutilized. Her analysis consistently proved accurate, her suggestions led to successful operations, and her quiet professionalism impressed everyone who worked with her. The range safety clerk had become an unofficial tactical consultant whose opinions were actively sought by officers who would never have spoken to her just weeks earlier. The breakthrough came when Sarah's personnel file was reviewed by specialists at the Pentagon, who were trying to understand how someone with her capabilities had ended up in such an inappropriate position. They discovered that her original aptitude tests had indicated exceptional spatial reasoning and hand-eye coordination, scores that should have qualified her for advanced training programs, but bureaucratic errors and gender-based assumptions had resulted in her being assigned to support roles instead. Military officials realized they weren't just dealing with an isolated case of misplaced personnel. Sarah represented a systemic problem with how the armed forces identified and developed talent, especially among personnel who didn't fit traditional expectations. Her situation became a case study in missed opportunities and the importance of looking beyond surface appearances when evaluating capabilities. Colonel Henderson received authorization to implement an immediate reclassification process that would allow Sarah to pursue formal sniper training and potentially qualify for special operations roles. The paperwork was expedited through channels that normally took months or years, with Sarah's demonstrated performance serving as justification for the unusual career acceleration. The base's other snipers and marksmen, initially skeptical about the attention Sarah was receiving, quickly became believers when they had opportunities to observe her shooting firsthand. During informal range sessions, she consistently outperformed soldiers with years of specialized training, demonstrating not just accuracy, but also the kind of instinctive understanding of ballistics and environmental factors that separated true experts from merely competent shooters. Sarah approached her new opportunities with the same quiet determination that had characterized her years of private preparation. She understood that formal recognition brought both opportunities and responsibilities that would challenge her in ways she had never experienced. The anonymous range safety clerk was gone forever, replaced by someone who would have to prove herself repeatedly in roles where expectations would be much higher and failure would be much more visible. 6 months after the incident that changed everything, Colonel Henderson was reviewing quarterly personnel reports when he came across a file that stopped him cold. Sarah Martinez now held the distinction of having the highest confirmed kill count of any sniper currently stationed at Fort Henderson, with 121 confirmed eliminations during her deployment to overseas operations, following her rapid reclassification and specialized training. The numbers seemed almost impossible to believe, but they were meticulously documented and verified by multiple sources. After completing an accelerated sniper school program where she broke several marksmanship records, Sarah had been deployed to active combat zones where her unique combination of natural talent and years of self-directed preparation proved devastatingly effective against enemy combatants. Rodriguez, who had become Sarah's unofficial mentor and advocate, provided regular updates on her progress that consistently amazed everyone involved in her career transition. The quiet woman who had once been overlooked as just another support staff member was now being discussed at the highest levels of military command as one of the most naturally gifted snipers in the entire armed forces. Colonel Henderson reflected on the lessons learned from Sarah's remarkable story. How many other exceptional individuals were currently serving in positions that failed to recognize or utilize their true capabilities? Sarah's case had prompted reviews of personnel classification systems and evaluation procedures designed to prevent similar oversights in the future. The base's shooting range, where Sarah had once worked as an anonymous safety officer, now featured a plaque commemorating her achievements and serving as inspiration for other soldiers who might be underestimating their own potential. Her former storage room quarters had been converted into a study area where soldiers could access the same technical resources and training materials that Sarah had used during her years of private preparation. Sarah's story had also attracted attention from military leadership development programs, interested in understanding how exceptional performers could be identified and cultivated more effectively. Her systematic approach to self-improvement and her ability to maintain focus and determination despite being undervalued for years became a case study in resilience and personal excellence. During a recent visit to Fort Henderson, Sarah had returned to the range where her journey began, but now she wore the uniform and insignia of an elite sniper with combat decorations that reflected her extraordinary service record. The transformation from overlooked clerk to recognized expert was complete, but those who knew her well understood that her essential character remained unchanged. She still arrived early, still prepared meticulously for every task, and still maintained the quiet professionalism that had characterized her work, even when no one was paying attention. The difference was that now her dedication and expertise were properly recognized and utilized in roles that matched her exceptional abilities. Colonel Henderson had learned to look more carefully at all his personnel, understanding that exceptional capability could exist in unexpected places, and that his responsibility as a leader included identifying and developing talent wherever it might be found. Sarah's story served as a constant reminder that assumptions about people's limitations could blind leaders to extraordinary potential right under their noses. The 121 confirmed eliminations represented more than just marksmanship statistics. They reflected the successful operations, saved lives, and completed missions that resulted from finally matching the right person with the right role. Each number in that file represented a moment when Sarah's hidden talents had been deployed effectively in service of her country's objectives. Rodriguez often told new soldiers about the range safety clerk who had surprised everyone with capabilities that exceeded those of veteran snipers. The story had become legendary at Fort Henderson, inspiring others to pursue excellence regardless of their current positions and reminding leaders to remain alert for hidden talent among their subordinates. Sarah's remarkable journey from overlooked support staff to elite sniper had fundamentally changed how the base approached personnel development and evaluation. Her success demonstrated that with proper recognition, training, and opportunities, individuals could exceed even their own expectations of what they might accomplish in military service. The quiet woman, who had once been invisible to almost everyone around her, had become a symbol of untapped potential and the importance of looking beyond surface appearances. When evaluating human capabilities, her 121 confirmed eliminations stood as testament to what could be achieved when exceptional talent was finally recognized, properly trained, and given appropriate opportunities to serve. Colonel Henderson kept Sarah's file on his desk as a reminder that leadership required not just managing the obvious talents, but discovering and cultivating the hidden capabilities that might be overlooked by less attentive observers. In a profession where lives often depended on having the right person in the right position, Sarah's story represented both a cautionary tale about missed opportunities and an inspiring example of what became possible when those opportunities were finally provided.